Hi, I wanted to talk a little bit about lighting. I want to talk about lighting in Horizon, but I just want to talk about lighting in general, as far as using lighting as a way to sketch out and create mood in the places that you're building. So this is sort of a little macabre scene that I'll use for lighting demonstration. But one of the unique things about how Horizon uses light is rather than actually having light fixtures that follow sort of real world laws of, of fixtures and how light works, really it's quite simple. So I'm going to go into edit mode real quick, and we're going to have a look at this little arrangement. And what you can do is you can turn any object into a lighting instrument. So right here, I've got this cube, and then I can bring this cube in here, and it basically does nothing. It's just a cube. But if I open up my menu here and I open up the styles, which you'll probably all be aware of, if I choose the material type as glow, then anything that I paint with it becomes a light source. So if I choose this color and I choose that, now my cube has become a light source that I can bring into the environment. And you can see it takes a moment, but once it goes in there, it starts to affect the lighting in the environment. So not only do you have the power of creating an environment that's evocative and using colors that help tell your story, you also have the power of lighting in this very, very simple and very sort of intuitive way. And then as far as light intensity, you can change the light intensity here in this sidebar, but you can also change it by choosing to change the scale of the light. So if I bring it down in here and bring it down here and wait a moment, you'll see the lighting is now sort of affecting underneath him. The other thing that's wonderful too in Horizon is that you can also, if you open the properties of a light or an object that's lit, you can choose to make that invisible. So if I click on this, and I close that out. Now my light, although I can't see it other than this wireframe, this light is actually going to affect the scene, but people visiting the scene aren't necessarily going to see it. So if I'm in edit mode, I'll see the light fixture as this little box or whatever the shape I'm using with the geometry that's sort of ghosted in. But if I go out into preview mode, if I come over here, you can see that the light is invisible. So what I've done is I've taken this same room and I've replicated a couple of times in a world so that I can show you some of the ways lighting can be used to enhance a scene, but most importantly, how it's used to create mood and tell a story. So let's quickly jump into that world and I'll show you around. Okay, so here we are. Here's my sort of lineup of various ways I'm using lighting on the same scene. And each of these themes are, the only color I'm using is gray, so there's some lighter and darker grays, but there's no actual color that I'm painting with as far as the surfaces. With one exception, down here on the floor, I have a shape that I flattened very much like I do shadows to give an indication that moonlight is coming in and it's hitting the floor. And also, if you look over here, you'll see the parallax of the moon outside the window. So any opportunity that you have of suggesting or creating a light source, it will help create the mood and also create some sense of believability that light is coming from a particular place and affecting the surrounding environment. Something else I've used in here is each of these will have its own sound effect that's specific to the environment. So a couple of things are happening in here. One is I've got this light on the floor, which is creating mood and suggesting it's nighttime. Also, I've brought in objects that the light that I do have in here is sort of bouncing off of. So the sort of rubble that's on the floor is angled so that it's affected by the lights that I bring in here. And basically there are three lights in here apart from the moon itself. One is a larger light that's sitting in in the window. One is to the left-hand side of the skeleton here. And then this edge lighting is a red light that's sort of sitting by the left ear of the skeleton. The advantage to rim lighting or backlighting is that it creates more dimensionality and makes things pop. Also, if there's an opportunity, if your predominant color is a cool color, think about whether or not you can bring a warm accent to help just sort of give dimension and some variety. If you're doing a really warm environment, there may be a potential to bring in a cool color. And so we'll come back and look at all these scenes in edit mode so you can see exactly where the lights are. But here's one example. And so it's meant to create mood. It's suggests a time of day and a sense of drama. So over here is the next version. And so this is the exact same scene. The couple of additions that I've made are I've made a lantern so that we are looking right at the light fixture that is creating the lighting effect. It is glowing and illuminating the skeleton, but I also have added another smaller light around the knee that's shining up to give more of an accent and some sense that the intensity is coming from the light fixture. I've also done the shadow effect, which I used in the chair tutorial. And I also used a graphic here, these circle pieces to suggest graphically that the light is pooling in a particular area. Although not as realistic, it definitely creates drama and it suggests a pinpoint where you're looking in on what's happening. It tells your eye where to focus. I've also added a mouse in here just to add some extra whimsy. But you can see, especially these pieces of rubble, even though they're just blocks that have been stuck in the ground, look at how they're being affected by the lighting. So one of the ways that Horizon is doing lighting is that they're sort of baking it in real time. So once you place a light, you'll take a moment, and then all of a sudden you'll see it sort of click into place. It's sort of baking it into the environment. It's a way to keep these low poly models dynamic, but also something that can run on something like the Quest headset. So here's another example of changing color, creating a light fixture that tells the viewer where the light source is coming from, and then adding a couple of extra pieces which add surfaces for the light to bounce off of. So this one over here, basically the same scene, but I wanted to warm it up. So it's more of a fall or spring day. The bird's coming in, getting the attention of the skeleton, and you've got sort of this intense light that's coming in the window that's backlighting the bird, and then you've got this sort of bathing, this warm light in here with the addition of these leaves suggesting that there's trees outside. But you're also seeing I'm using a side light to help pop the skeleton out back in here. And then if you look up top, I'm also using a cool light just to add focus to the area where the bird is with the warm light. So there's some cool light up above. And then this last one over here, I've got this room where it's sort of flooding. And so there's a little bit of animation where the water is rising and falling, and some suggestion that the water's pouring in the window for this poor unfortunate skeleton. There is no animating lighting at the moment, and I wanted to give the illusion that light was bouncing off the surface of the water onto the ceiling. So there's a lot of little spotlights that are sort of floating toward the ceiling to create that dappled light. Also, as you'll see that the shape, the water itself has no shadows on it. Rather than turning this into a lit surface, because that would kind of blow out the room with blue light because it's so big, I've actually just made the water unlit, both on the main body of water as well as the water that's pouring out of the window. And then I've brought the mouse back, and he's bobbing around on the cup. So all of these suggest some sort of drama or some sort of story. There's absolutely possibilities of adding much more drama and interest. And the one thing I really want to say about lighting, especially in Horizon and 3D programs like it, although Horizon's fairly unique, is that as a designer, whether I'm designing physical places or I'm designing places that are going to be virtual, normally I would work with an actual professional lighting designer. And the idea of using colored lights or lighting as part of the concept phase is something that would happen in a conversation later on. So like this environment would be done without the lighting, and then I would sit down with the lighting designer and we would discuss it, and then they would make decisions that would try to meet whatever my goals were for each scene. What this allows me is, even though I'm not a lighting designer, I can sketch out mood and suggest color and just really help the story along, even though I know the lighting designer is going to come and add so much more depth and understanding to the way that light works. So I'm not necessarily trying to design the lighting for them. I'm trying to help them understand what the picture is in my head as best as possible, and then they can take it and run with it. So using a 3D tool to mock up lighting is incredibly valuable as a way to communicate your ideas. So let me quickly just jump into edit mode so you can see what I did with the lighting. So I've got, in this particular one, I've got my sound box up here that's just making the sound in the room. I've got this box right here, which is faking the moonlight that's sort of bathing this area. I've got this sort of blue light here, and that's sort of shining up against the side of the skeleton. And then I've got my red light here, which is sort of carving out this warm edge to the skeleton. Some other trick that I am doing right now too is you'll see this blue line around here. I've actually created a box that's painted black. Then I've turned the collision and the visibility off. And this was a trick that was taught to me by R.C. Deggs. And what it does is it contains the light and has the interior not as affected by the outside lighting. So it's actually quite a bit darker inside here than it would be if I hadn't placed this box around the outside. So each of these, you can see, has one of those boxes around the outside of it. So really cool trick, and I couldn't get the amount of drama that I have in these scenes without it. So in this particular one, I've got the main light source, which is this actual painted surface on my lantern. So it's this light fixture is actually lighting the room. And then I've got this little one right here. That's one shining around the knees at the bottom part of the face. And then that's pretty much it for lighting in this scene. Everything else is faked. These circles are actually geometry. In fact, if you look underneath, because they continue being circles, you can see that the circles are actually breaking through the floor. So if I was to use this effect, I would have to make sure that wherever they were sticking out the back end, that they were not visible to someone visiting the space. And then also I've sort of loosely created a cast shadow. And the way that I did that is I took the upper torso, I made a copy of it, I flattened it flat, painted it black, and then just sort of arranged it so it looked like this light fixture was casting that shadow. And similarly, I did the same thing with the legs and the feet. I created a separate model, I flattened it, painted it black, and then placed it so it would give the illusion that it's casting a shadow. So over here in my sort of autumn or spring scene, I've got a bright light that's happening in the window that suggests that sunlight is happening from the outside, and you can see that it's casting on the edge of the skeleton looking up at the bird. So all the attention is on the bird. In here is the warm light that I want to sort of fill the space with, and that's being reflected on the ground. And also you can see that it's also lighting the leaves here. And then I've got this warm light carving out just a highlight on the side of the skeleton. And then this big light up here is the blue light that is helping suggest that this room is otherwise kind of chilly and cold, but this warm sunlight is coming in and sort of bathing the room nearest to the window. And so lastly, over here, where I was talking about, I've got really one main light source, which is this one, and that's one that's sort of suggesting that light is bouncing off of the water and illuminating the skeleton. And then underneath here, I've got this one, and that's the hottest light that's sort of pointing up, suggesting the light's bouncing up into his face. And then to create that sort of illusion of lighting that's sort of bouncing off the walls and ceiling, even though it would be moving in reality. I've placed these cubes in here, and I've put them at weird angles. I don't know if that has really any effect, but I thought it made sense rather than giving them a hard edge, that it would suggest a more sort of animated, organic bounce light. And then I just animated the water and animated the mouse. And then this sort of suggested that the water was pouring in and filling the room. So anyway, thanks for following along. I think that this is a wonderful way to suggest lighting in your scenes. There's a huge amount of drama and magic that can happen. And then any opportunity you have of creating lights that show you where the light's coming from. So in this case, it's the moon that's shining on the floor, or you have an opportunity of making things more dimensional by putting a side or backlight that helps create the 3D effect. Or if you can actually put a light fixture that suggests not only that that's where the light is coming from, but it actually is coming from the object by painting the surface a glowing texture, and then help accent it by hiding some additional lights to help create the drama. So that's it. Thank you for following along. These are fun to do, and I really look forward to seeing everybody using lots of light effects in their various world projects.